Sidewalk Labs is this amazing opportunity to bring a bunch of technologists together with a bunch of urbanists to take advantage of the amazing things that technology has to offer with a deep understanding about what really makes cities tick.
Instead of saying a problem is just about technology or it's just about policy, in most cases the answer is it's both. We find the very best people in the world who can go and think about solving those types of problems.
Tonight's event focuses on the question, what can technology do to help cities improve housing affordability?
Welcome. Okay, yeah, my name's Eric. I'm a designer in residence at Sidewalk. I have a shop out in San Francisco. I've been doing a lot of experiments and thinking around housing, and I'm just going to share with you some of our early thoughts on the matter. This is really meant to be provocative and encouraging conversation, and it's certainly in no form of finished product. So bear that in mind. All right. So focusing on housing and affordability, looking at supply and demand curves. This is from the Bay Area since 2010. You can see the amount of jobs that have been added since 2010 versus the number of houses that have been added. I had an old professor that used to say that housing is where jobs go to sleep at night, which I think that's kind of a nice way to think of it. And clearly, San Francisco hasn't been doing a very good job of giving those jobs places to sleep. But it's not just a Bay Area problem. You can see a lot of cities across the U.S. are quite constrained in terms of housing burden and the cost of affordable housing. More than 50% of income is what we're qualifying as cost burden. We're seeing that in cities across the country, East Coast, West Coast, Central. And so this is really all tied back to limited supply. And so if there's any way that we can help encourage more supply, hopefully we can drive some of that cost curve down. So a lot of our thinking has been on the supply side and how we can get more homes, more houses built. So we think access to attainable housing, safe and attainable housing is kind of a prerequisite for productive and equitable communities. So how can we achieve this? Obviously in a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of cities, we have things like restrictive land use that limits density. Sometimes it's outmoded, sometimes it's kind of out of fashion. People are wanting to have greater density in areas that are particularly transit oriented and they're struggling with that. Permitting times can be very, very lengthy and that ends up having impacts on cost. Access to capital is another restrictor. Construction costs, both material and labor, are also another one. So it's a very complicated problem, as you all know, and so what we're trying to do is carve out an area where we think we can help innovate in this space and help reduce the cost and bring affordability back to more people. So where do you even begin to take on this challenge? We wanted to start really small, and we've been thinking about backyard units and ADUs. And obviously this doesn't work coast to coast. I know New York has some very strict limitations on how backyard units are deployed. So please bear in mind that there's other problems that exist beyond New York City. And there's lots of places that can benefit from this type of solution. So why we like them, particularly they're small, it's kind of a bite-sized problem. Also it offers invisible density, which I think is an interesting opportunity where you're not going to get a lot of pushback from like view corridors or like blights on the horizon where this thing kind of exists kind of secretly. But then also do a lot for increasing density and availability of housing to more people. So if any of you are familiar with California housing regulation, the SB 1069 was just signed into law at the end of September. It goes into effect January 1, but it's really focused on making it easier for people to get ADUs in their backyard. So it greatly streamlines the process, it reduces the amount of fees, it reduces the off-street parking requirement. Generally just trying to make it easier for folks in California to adopt ADUs in their backyard. So if you think of the number of detached single-family homes in California, it's nearly 7 million across the entire state, so obviously that is potential sites for a lot of additional housing. In the Bay Area alone, we've identified about 400,000 potential sites, so even if only 1% of those convert to housing, that could be 4,000 additional units being put online in California, which does a lot for housing availability and in turn affordability. So we wanted to think about how we could strategically position ourselves to take advantage of this new opportunity and think about the ADU and how we can really put the user at the center of the whole thing. At Google, we always say put the user first and the rest will follow, and we wanted to apply that same type of thinking to the homeowner experience and how they would go ahead and introduce an ADU into their backyard. So 3 key categories for innovation that we have been thinking about and been exploring. Plan, test, and build. I'm going to talk about each of them kind of quickly. Obviously, we can talk about more questions at the end. Planning piece, we want to expedite design, planning, permits, and approvals through city relationships and product standardization. So there could be kind of a catalog of pre-approved units that would make it much easier for the city to say, okay, yeah, this meets all of our requirements, we're okay with this, sign off the permitting, hopefully expedite it electronically if possible, reduce what's typically now over 200 days, and make it hopefully in under a month. So how are we going to start with that? We're thinking an online educational tool is a great way to start. I worked on a project called Project Suncatcher at Google before, which is looking at backyard or looking at rooftop solar and seeing how much sun was falling on every roof and saying whether or not that house was good for a solar installation. We're kind of thinking of a similar idea for backyard ADUs, saying, okay, what's your address, what's the local jurisdiction, what's the restrictions, what are the permit requirements for you to get this done, and kind of walk people through it in a stepwise manner to make it easier for them to understand what the problem is and how they can act to introduce an ADU. So right now in San Mateo County, there's this like super convoluted process. It takes about 210 days to get a backyard ADU permit. This is a permit only. And we think by having electronic submissions and standardization and building a relationship with each of the jurisdictions, that we can reduce that to a much more straightforward, streamlined process that hopefully be much more time efficient. Next one I want to talk about is test. So this is really about creating outstanding user experiences in a small footprint. And so obviously backyards are small, backyard ADUs are even smaller. How can you make the experience of living in that thing feel like a much larger space than what is maybe a 200 or a 300 square foot unit? So typically site-built construction is very difficult to upgrade. It kind of exists as it is and you're stuck with it for the duration. It's slow to build, quite expensive. We're looking at how we could have over-the-air updates so the home can actually evolve and develop with the user as their needs change over time. So really thinking of a home as like a device as opposed to a structure, really thinking of it as a consumer type of device. So obviously we've been thinking a lot about sensors and technology and deep integration of this to help with health and comfort and security. How can the home actually be a performative aid and actually help you as opposed to just being a shelter? So things like keyless entry with facial recognition is something we've been playing around with. Smart toilets from Toto, looking for early precursors for heart attack or diabetes. Floor integrated scales for like longitudinal measurements and health. Wireless Vitals is a great company called Vital Radio that is looking at inferring respiratory and heart rate by just being in an environment. So there's no wearable required, just by being in the room it can infer your heart rate, which I think is a great thing for seniors you can think about. Air quality, sleep scenes, switchable glass for privacy. Just taking all this tech and integrating it really deeply and making a seamless user experience. Again, we challenge ourselves with this like 120 square foot unit, which is like an unreasonable size to think of an ADU. But we wanted to think if we could take 5 rooms of the house that you typically occupy, like the bedroom, kitchen, living room, whatever, could we consolidate all those rooms to a single room, bring all the furniture into a single room, and have a robot control which is deployed. So that one room can be the kitchen 1 minute, turn to the bedroom the next minute, turn to a dining room or living room the next minute. And so we're really developing this system and then the sensor network underneath to make sure that this can all be deployed safely. I'll play a short video of my lab and some of the stuff we've been experimenting with. So we have like a full-scale mock-up that we built, and we have like fake furniture and things in it, and experiment with a bunch of different sensors. This is a floor sensor that we have for measuring footprint and signature. Facial recognition unlocks the door, loads your user profile, which turns on your lighting, your preferred settings, unlocks the door for you. And we have depth sensing cameras that know where you are in the unit to make sure, like, you know, the descending bed doesn't fall on a crawling toddler or something. All the windows are controllable by voice, so you can have like privacy whenever you want, or if it knows you're going for a shower, it automatically turns on the privacy. There's some of the lifting mechanisms we've been exploring so far, mainly using drills. And the last one we'll talk about has to do with prefabrication and off-site construction as a way to improve material and labor efficiency and pass on the cost savings to end users. So site build is very disruptive and expensive and slow. If you had an ADU in your backyard, you can expect to be on site for a number of months for when you go foundations all the way to finishing a move-in date. With a prefab unit, you can ideally just crane it into place or bring in panelized construction that can be erected within a number of days as opposed to months. So there's a huge advantage there, also in cost savings in terms of labor. From the supply side, if you have BIM integrated into your ERP and you're producing these things at volume, you get a lot of cost savings that way in terms of volume purchasing, for instance. You can buy things, much larger orders and negotiate with vendors and suppliers in a way that you can't if you're just doing a case-by-case, site-by-site basis. This is another video. This is not my lab. This is a production facility in Tokyo by Seksui House, but they have 95% production of prefab volumetric modules done by robots and automation, which is insane. And it's just meant to be provocative, thinking like this is what housing production may look like in the future, which is radically different than nail benders and framers. So who will benefit from these, or who are likely customers? We think short-term stays, Airbnb is a revenue generator. Obviously in San Francisco there's some strict limitations around this, but I think a lot of communities that it still is a great option. Independent seniors we think is an excellent one. A lot of folks are looking to age in place and stay in the context of the communities and the people they know, and so this could be a great facilitator for people to stay with their families but then not be right in each other's back pockets. And the millennial renters, you know, the boomerang generation, folks who can't afford to buy but still want to be well connected, close to job opportunities and transit. Is there a path to market beyond ADUs? Maybe. I don't know, what if we make these really cool devices that can get stacked up on racks and we can think about quickly deployable and maybe even unbuildable developments for transitional housing in cities, for instance. It could also be useful for awkward sites or small parcels that are difficult to develop conventionally. We think of something like this in a tight fit. Also, this is a great idea for transition from parking lots. You know, if we think of a future where self-driving cars are much more prevalent, we may not need all the surface parking we have in cities today. This could be a quick way to test out markets and supply housing rapidly over existing surface uses as we kind of transition to the more autonomous vehicle future of cities. So it could be something like this, the parking lot, boom, now it's housing. It could be gone just as quick. You can also imagine a self-driving home, maybe one day. We put wheels on these things, they navigate around the countryside, or take you to the beach for your surf trip. So yeah, thanks a lot. I think we're going to do 10 minutes of questions now and suggestions. Thank you.